We have been exploring this fall, what does it mean to be all in? And we've done that through a series of words that start with I-N. And it's been an opportunity for us to talk about how God's power is at work in this community. And what does it mean for us to be united in ministry, to be united in some common values and commitments, and to be doing the work that God calls us to. We started by talking about what does it mean to be included. And we talked about what is the community promise that we're making as a church. And that community promise is that you can come as you are and you'll be welcomed. You can be who you are and you'll be celebrated. And you can explore where you are and you're going to be encouraged in that work. And so we started by talking about what does it mean to be included? What does it mean for us to make that kind of commitment to other people and to live up to that promise? And about just those abiding values. We then talked about what does it mean to be involved? And we talked about what does it mean for us as a community that continues to be growing as a healthy, dynamic church, and the ways that involvement is evolving and is growing. I mean, we are a community that is just praying. We are a community that is becoming more and more active in how we are connecting with our neighbors, about how we are helping our own community grow. And we talked about how that work is done by you. It's done by the community. You know, you have a couple pastors and you have a small staff, but the vast majority of the ministry that takes place through this church, through this congregation, is because we are involved and the power that comes through that. Think how puny the ministry of this church would be if it was just up to your pastors or just to the staff. But when you think about, the 1,500 or so committed people that make up this faith community and their involvement, the impact that we have. We've also talked about the power of an invitation. We talked about how more and more people are finding us through that power of that invitation, and that is really the secret sauce for a vibrant church, is to be an inviting church where we're inviting our friends and our neighbors to connect with us and to be a part of what we are doing as a community of faith. Last week, Pastor Kelly did just such a wonderful job of talking about, what does it mean to be informed? To be informed about what goes in to helping a ministry such as the Groves do its work. Next week, we're going to be talking about the power of all being in sync. But today, I'd like to talk about what does it mean to be invested? What does it mean to be someone that is truly invested in this work? Kelly read for us 2 parables, and it's just this brief little passage of Scripture. And what Jesus is helping His followers to better understand is the nature of the kingdom of heaven. And what Jesus wants them to understand is what does it mean to be all in? What does it mean to be invested in the work that God is doing in the world? And so He shares these 2 parables. The first parable is about this person that ends up finding his treasure in a field. And they are so overjoyed by what they discovered that they go and they gather together everything that they own, they sell it all, and they go buy the field. And then there's a second really short parable that follows right after that most scholars think that these parables need to be read in tandem with each other. And it's about a merchant. And this merchant is brokering in pearls, but it finds this one pearl that is so exquisite, that is so beautiful, that is so out of the norm, that this merchant, once again, sells everything that the merchant has and goes and buys that pearl. And what Jesus wants us to understand is that as disciples, as people that have experienced God's grace, that joy, that beauty, that overwhelming sense of opportunity grabs us in such a way that we invest the very best of what we have. We invest our whole selves in that. And Jesus wants us to get a glimpse of what's it like when we experience God's grace. And then we invest ourselves in response to that. So this morning, I would like us to talk about what does it mean as a community of faith that experiences God's grace and then responds by investing ourselves in that work. And I'd like to do that through a series of just illustrations and stories about the work of this community, about what are we investing in when we commit ourselves to this work. One of the things that we're committing ourselves to is investing in this vision that we have about what does it mean to welcome and to reach new people. One of the gifts I have is that I have the opportunity to be a part of these Connect and Grow classes. And in these Connect and Grow classes, one of the things we do is we talk. It's an opportunity for people who are interested in the church to meet some new people, to ask their questions about the church. It's an opportunity for me to get to know them better and to talk about the ministry of this church. And one of the things we're discovering is almost every single person that's choosing to make the Grove their faith community is doing so because of your values. They're saying those are exactly the values that represent who I am, and those are the kind of values that I want to invest myself in. I'll tell you, I'm just thrilled to hear that, to hear how those values resonate with our neighbors and how they want to be a part of that. You know, some of them have said, the reason I come here is because of your values, but the reason I stay is because the joy I experience in this community. And so part of what we're about is investing ourselves in reaching and welcoming new people that share the values about what does it mean to be a community where everyone is welcomed, where everyone is celebrated, and where everyone is encouraged. The second thing that I find fascinating is how many people are connecting with this new faith community. People that we are reaching and welcoming that come from such a diverse background. People that find themselves within the Christian tradition and outside of the Christian tradition are saying that this is the kind of community I want to be a part of because this is a community that truly honors the journey that I'm on, that encourages me when I'm thinking about the Christian faith and life, that doesn't say that I have to confess to a certain set of church doctrines, dogmas, or beliefs, but rather presents the way of Jesus in a welcoming way and invites me to explore where I'm at and to be supported in this community as we do this work. So part of what you're investing in is not only welcoming all people, but you're investing in people that come from a variety of traditions. Just recently, we've had folks that come from the Catholic tradition, evangelical traditions, other mainline traditions, folks that have from Jewish background, and folks that really say, you know what, I haven't really had a church background, but there's something that I'm looking for. And this is a place that I've discovered that supports me in that work of exploring where I'm at. Not only are we committing ourselves and investing in reaching and welcoming new people, but we're also investing ourselves in how do we help people grow? How do we help people grow in their ability to love? How do we help people grow and develop in their ability to love God and to love their neighbor? You know, one of the ways that we do that is we have 178 households that have children and students in this congregation. You know, one of the things I am so grateful for is the congregations that I've been a part of and where my children have been raised and grown and nurtured in the Christian faith and life. I have been blessed by congregations that had caring adults that got to know my children by name, loved them, invested the very best of what they had to offer in them, shared with them the beauty of the Christian faith and following the ways of Jesus, and have helped nurture and grow them in the Christian faith. You know what? I am grateful that my children had that experience. I want all of our children to have that experience. And this is a congregation that is absolutely committed to offering the very best of what we have to loving children and students and journeying with them and helping them grow and mature and develop, not only in stature, not only in wisdom, but also in the faith. And part of what this congregation has a rich legacy of is investing in children and students. And I am so grateful for that. But one of the things that we also understand, and it's really kind of, if you will, a growing edge in our faith community, is we need to also be investing in those children and students' parents. Because the first church for any child is actually their home. You know, the best predictor for a child to have a growing, vital, dynamic faith is to have parents that have a growing, vital, and dynamic faith. So part of what we understand is we need to be investing ourselves in the parents of children and students. We've been doing that by helping bring those parents together. Amy Fuller, with our Minister to Families with Students, does a wonderful job of bringing different age groups together for a meal and for conversation about, what's it like? What's it like? What are the challenges and the blessings and the opportunities to be raising these precious young people? Family Grove Gatherings is an opportunity for families with young children to come together, to find each other, to develop their relational network, to support and encourage each other in this awesome task of parenthood. And part of that evening is spent where all of the families are together. But then the last part of that is there's a breakout time where the children are able to play together and the parents are able to then meet and talk about some of the things that are really critical to faith and to parenthood. This fall, we're launching some new opportunities for both moms and dads to come together and to talk about, to grow in their relationships with one another, to support one another, but also to do that work of talking about, what does it mean to be a mother or a father, and the responsibilities we have about how we raise our children and how we are supportive and faithful to the partners that are also raising our children. So part of what we are committing ourselves to is this work of helping parents care for their children. We are also just deeply committed to helping all of the adults in this church grow in their Christian faith and life. I am really excited about our next all-church book study. For some of you that are new to us, twice a year we invite the whole congregation to read a book together. We do it in the fall, and then we do it during the season of Lent. And what we do is we have a common book that we read. Many of our folks end up joining a small group then where they come together once a week for 6 weeks to discuss that book. Some of our folks say, my schedule or some of my other commitments don't allow me to do that. But they also get the book and they read it. And then Kelly and we preach on that throughout the whole series. And so after worship, we're going to be selling those books, Learning to Walk in the Dark by Barbara Brown Taylor. I would encourage you to be a part of that study that's going to start October 20th. And spend 6 weeks really digging into what can we learn about what darkness has to teach us. Barbara Brown Taylor says so often we make the mistake of thinking of glorifying lightness and then demonizing darkness. And she just talks about biblically how off and wrong that is. And how the Bible helps us understand that the darkness has very valuable lessons to teach us about the Christian faith and life. Part of what we also are investing ourselves, though, in is healing a broken world. We see that as just being fundamental to who we are as a faith community and as the only faithful response to the grace of Christ in our lives is we need to be a part of that work, just like Bob invited us, to be a part of that work that's helping heal our broken world. One of the ways we've done that is we've realized that we share the block with some young students, both here on our Woodbury campus and in our Cottage Grove campus. We share the block with an elementary school. Royal Oaks is just a little bit to the west of us right here. Down in Cottage Grove, our Cottage Grove campus shares the block with Armstrong Elementary School. And some of our neighbors, some of those children in those schools, are food insecure, which means that they are allowed to have either free or reduced lunches, which also implies that perhaps there's not enough resources in the home to make sure that those children receive the nutrition that they need. And so every single week we send 50 households in Royal Oaks and Armstrong home with a bag of food. And you do that because of your commitment and the investments you've made into being the loving presence of Christ to this world. And I am just so grateful for that. A couple stories I'd like to share with you, and I'm not going to use many names, but these are both stories that I had permission to share with you about how this faith community is investing in healing a broken world. One is we had a family that found our church, and it turns out that the woman, the wife, one of the members of this family had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they knew that she had about a year to live. Well, they had another church in town, which I thought was really, really interesting. But when this diagnosis was made, they ended up coming here. And the reason they ended up coming here is because they knew that this congregation was the kind of community that would walk with them and be present to them and support them in this last year of her life. And I cannot tell you how proud I was of this congregation in the ways you supported and loved that household. It included everything from providing meals to home visits to lots and lots of prayer. It involved us leading the funeral that ended up celebrating this beautiful soul's life. And the reason that happened is because you now have a community of reputation as being the kind of community that invests in other people's lives and offers the very best of what we have to offer to those families. One more quick story that's somewhat similar to that. We had a family that had been a part of this church many, many years ago. In fact, their children were raised in this church. Had not been a part of this, I'm guessing, a part of this church for, I'm guessing almost approaching 20 years. The youngest child in this household, who's now a young adult, ended up dying in a tragic act of domestic violence. And it's one of those things that was in the paper, and it was just, as you can imagine, just heartbreaking for this congregation. This is a situation where this young couple were struggling with some addiction issues, was struggling with some mental health issues, was under incredible strain and pressure, and part of the ways that got acted out was in violent ways. And ultimately that ended up in the death of one of these persons. Well, this family, in their brokenness and in their grief and their pain, wasn't really quite sure where to turn. But one of the daughters, who lives now on the West Coast, ended up saying to Mom, we should reach out to the Methodist Church. That was the family that loved us when we were children and when we were students. And I think they're the ones we need to go to. And so I think Amy Fuller was the first one to receive that phone call, and Amy came down and visited with me. And sure, that's exactly what we do. And so we ended up welcoming that family, and planning the funeral for their son and supporting them and loving them. Both daughters lived, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and both daughters, after the funeral was over, it was time for them to get back to their lives there. But you know what? Mom took a little while away from here. Just the heartache and the grief was too much. But then slowly she started connecting with us. At first it was kind of like once a month, kind of, sporadic. Over time it became more and more consistent. And now she worships with us almost every single Sunday. And as I was talking with her this week and asking her if she felt comfortable with me using her story she said, oh, absolutely. And she said, in fact, I'm glad you're telling my story. She said, because one of the things I want this community to know is that in my darkest hour, when I did not think I was going to get through this, she said, the people of the Grove surrounded me with love and care. She said, they met me and they didn't try to, they didn't do anything except just be present for me and support me and love me. And she said, this is now a place where I find peace and serenity. It's the place where I found healing for my soul. And it's the place that I find encouragement as I move into this new life that Jesus has given me. That is what you are investing yourselves in. So next Sunday, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be in sync. It's going to be our final IN word. And we had to get a little creative with this one anyways. But we're going to talk about what does it mean to be in sync. And it's also Commitment Sunday. And so one of the things that we're inviting you to do is to invest the very best of what you have in the work of your church. So we always set some goals. We just feel like, you know what, it's good to have goals so that we know, how we're doing. So one of the things we said is our goal is that 270 households are going to make a financial commitment that they're going to invest themselves in the work of the Grove. Of those 270 households, we are hoping that 130 households are going to increase their commitment from last year to this year. One of the things that's just been a joy about pastoring this church and being a part of this community is we, for the last 3 years, have grown significantly in our worship attendance. And a lot of you have noticed that because you've commented on that. We are reaching more and more of our friends and neighbors. We have more first-time visitors than we've had since I've been here. We're becoming a sticky church where people are connecting with this faith community and saying, this is where I want to be included and involved and invested. The challenge we've been facing, though, is we've been running about a 7% gap between our giving and our expenses. And we have this opportunity between now and the end of the year and in this next year to close that gap. And so we're hoping that we're going to have 130 households that are going to be increasing their giving to help us close that 7% gap. We also always pick some demographic group, and we said, you know what, we're going to give some special attention to this demographic group and invite them to be especially intentional about how they're investing in the work of the church. And this year we're focusing on families with children and students. And our hope is that we are going to have 78 of those households that have children and students living at home, be making a commitment, a financial commitment to our ministry. So those are the goals. So here's what I would invite you to do as we prepare to make our investment, to make our faith response to the grace we've experienced in Jesus Christ. The first thing I'd invite you to do is just spend some time reflecting about how God has been at work in your life, in the good news of God's love for you. I'd also invite you to let this commitment, this investment that you're making, to be born in prayer. Invite God into this conversation. Invite God into your reflections and your deliberations. And let this gift be born in prayer. And like in the parables today, let us be someone who offers the very, very best of what we have. Sometimes we can be tempted to look at our leftovers. That's truly not which honors God and demonstrates the investment of what we bring. And then next Sunday, let us all be in sync, as with joyful hearts, we bring forward our gifts that represent the very best of what we have, that's what was born in prayer. And that represents our commitment to the work of ministry through this church. I give God thanks for you. I give God thanks for how God is working in and through us. And I give God thanks for the gift of this day and our ministry going forward. Amen.